The human soldier stood in chains, his wrists bound with glowing metal that burned his skin. His boots dragged across the black stone floor as two alien guards pulled him forward, their tall frames armored in plates that shimmered like liquid steel. Every step echoed through the vast chamber, a place built not for comfort but for intimidation. The ceiling rose so high that the flicker of torches seemed to vanish into shadow. At the end of the long hall, upon a throne of jagged crystal, sat the queen of the Khazar Dominion. Soraka was enormous by human standards, her body tall and muscular, her skin a pale shade that shimmered faintly under the light. Her eyes, glowing gold with a vertical slit, watched the prisoner with the cold patience of a predator. Around her throne, alien nobles gathered in silence, their sharp features twisted in disdain. To them, this soldier was nothing more than broken prey, dragged before their monarch to prove the power of the Dominion. The guards shoved him to his knees, forcing his head down. Elias Ward clenched his jaw but did not bow. His body was bruised and his uniform torn, marked with the dust of battle and dried blood. He looked small in the vast chamber, a single man surrounded by giants, yet something in his stance kept him from appearing weak. The queen raised a clawed hand, and the room grew silent. Her voice, when it came, was smooth yet heavy, like the echo of stone grinding against stone. "This is the human who would not fall?" A noble stepped forward, bowing his head. "Yes, Your Majesty. He survived the bombardment on Thraxis. He resisted capture for 7 days in the ruins, fighting with nothing but scraps. Even when surrounded, he did not yield until forced unconscious." A murmur spread among the aliens, half mockery, half interest. Soraka's gaze lingered on Elias, studying him as though she were considering a strange creature she had not seen before. "Stand him upright," she ordered. The guards yanked him to his feet. Elias staggered, his body weak from hunger and wounds, but he forced himself to meet her eyes. Golden fire glowed in her stare, yet he did not look away. His breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling with effort, but his chin remained high. Soraka tilted her head, curious. "Human soldier," she said, her words carrying through the chamber. "Do you understand why you are here?" Elias' voice was hoarse but steady. "Because you think killing me will make you feel stronger." The chamber fell into uneasy silence. A few nobles hissed at his defiance, their clawed hands twitching in outrage. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons, ready to strike. But the queen raised her hand once more, silencing them. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something close to amusement. "You speak boldly for one who is broken," she said. "Do you not fear death?" "I've seen it too many times to fear it," Elias answered. "It's just another step. What matters is how we walk before it comes." His words hung in the air like smoke. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. To them, defiance in the face of the queen was madness. Yet the queen herself leaned back in her throne, her golden eyes fixed on the human as though he were more than a prisoner. She rose slowly from her throne, the sound of her armored steps echoing through the hall. She towered over Elias, her shadow swallowing him whole. One strike of her claw could have ended him, but she did not strike. Instead, she studied him as if searching for something hidden beneath his battered shell. "You are weak," she said finally, her voice low. "Your body frail, your strength insignificant. Among my kind, you would not survive a single trial, yet you stare at me as though you are my equal." Elias's lips cracked into the ghost of a smile, though his face was pale with exhaustion. Maybe because strength isn't only about the body. He wouldn't understand. A growl rippled through the chamber. To question the queen's understanding was unthinkable. But Soraka did not strike him. Her eyes narrowed, studying him more deeply now. She could feel it, the strange fire in him that refused to bend even when every bone in his body screamed to collapse. "You amuse me, human," she said at last. "You should be nothing, yet you refuse to act like nothing. Perhaps I will keep you alive a while longer. Perhaps I will test this spirit of yours." The nobles looked at one another in disbelief. Mercy was not in the queen's nature. Prisoners were trophies or corpses, never guests. Yet here she stood, sparing the human with no explanation. The guards pulled Elias back, but his eyes never left the queen. For a brief moment, it was as if the two stood alone in the vast hall, locked in a silent battle of will. One ruled an empire of countless worlds. The other was a broken soldier, shackled and weak. Yet somehow in that moment the distance between them seemed smaller than it should have been. And though Soraka turned back to her throne, a question remained in her mind, one she had not asked in centuries. What gave such a fragile creature the power to stare down a queen without fear? The thought lingered, sharp and unwelcome, yet strangely impossible to ignore. Elias awoke the next day in a chamber unlike any cell he had ever seen. The walls shimmered with faint blue light, humming with strange energy. It was not a dungeon, but neither was it comfortable. A bed of stone, a small dish of water, and a single glowstone in the corner, that was all. He sat up slowly, his body aching with every movement. His arms still carried the red marks of the restraints. The heavy doors creaked open and 2 alien guards stepped inside. They motioned for him to rise, their tall spears glowing faintly at the tips. Elias pushed himself to his feet, his body stiff but his spirit unbowed. Without a word, they led him through twisting corridors until they entered a vast arena, carved from the heart of black stone. The air was thick with heat, and the stands around the arena were filled with alien nobles, warriors, and spectators. Their voices echoed sharp and guttural as they watched the human step into the center. Elias felt the weight of their stares pressing down on him like a mountain. He knew what this was, a test, a game. At the far end of the arena, the queen sat upon a raised platform, her golden eyes never leaving him. She lifted her clawed hand and the crowd silenced. "Human," she said, her voice carrying easily over the noise. "You spoke of strength yesterday. You claimed it was more than flesh. Today you will prove this claim. Endure or be broken." From the side gates, the first challenger entered. A Khazar warrior, taller than Elias by 2 heads, muscles rippling under scaled armor. He carried no blade, only his fists, each one heavy as stone. The crowd roared approval. Elias breathed slowly, steadying himself. He had no weapon, no shield, only his will. The warrior lunged. Elias dodged to the side, his body sluggish but his instincts sharp. He ducked under a massive swing that cracked the stone floor where he had stood. The force of the strike made the ground tremble. Elias backed away, panting, every part of him already screaming with exhaustion. The crowd laughed, mocking his weakness. The alien warrior charged again, fists swinging like hammers. Elias took a blow to his ribs and fell hard, pain exploding through his chest. He struggled to rise, gasping for breath. "Stay down, human," the warrior growled in his native tongue, though Elias understood little of it. Still, the meaning was clear. Elias spat blood onto the stone and forced himself up. His legs trembled, but he stood. "Not today," he muttered under his breath. The fight dragged on. Elias did not match the alien in strength, but he endured. Each time he fell, he rose again. Each time he was struck, he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The alien warrior grew frustrated, his strikes becoming wild, reckless. Finally, after what felt like hours, Elias ducked low at the right moment, and the alien's fist slammed into the arena wall, cracking the stone. With a cry of pain, the warrior stumbled back, clutching his injured hand. The queen raised her hand, ending the fight. The warrior was dragged away, defeated not by a stronger foe, but by his own rage against a man who refused to yield. The crowd murmured in disbelief. A fragile human had survived where few expected him to last more than a moment. But the test was not finished. A second gate opened and another warrior entered, this one armed with a spear. Elias swallowed hard, his body already broken, but he faced the new opponent. The spear slashed the air, grazing his arm, cutting through cloth and skin. Elias cried out but did not fall. He dodged again, each movement slower than the last. Blood ran down his arm, but he gripped the shaft of the spear when it came too close, pulling with all his strength. The alien wrenched it free easily, throwing Elias to the ground. The human's vision blurred, the stone spinning beneath him. He wanted to give in, to close his eyes and sleep forever. But then he thought of the men who had fought beside him, of the families waiting on distant colonies, of the promise he had made to himself, to never kneel before tyranny. He forced himself up once more, staggering to his feet. The crowd roared now, but it was no longer mockery. It was surprise, even respect. They had seen warriors with strength, but few with such stubborn will. The second warrior pressed forward, but before he could strike again, the queen raised her hand. The arena fell silent. Her golden eyes studied Elias, who stood swaying, bloodied but unbroken. "Enough," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. "The human has endured." The guard stepped forward to drag Elias away, but he lifted his head and they met the queen's gaze. His lips parted, and though his voice was weak, it carried through the silence. "You see, strength isn't only in the body." For the first time, there was no laughter in the chamber, no sneers. Only silence and the faint sound of Elias's ragged breathing. The queen tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she sat back upon her throne. As the guards pulled Elias toward the exit, she spoke, her voice low enough that only she could hear her own words. "Perhaps there is more to you than I thought." Elias did not hear her, but the way her eyes lingered on him as he was taken away said enough. Something in the queen had shifted, though even she could not yet name it. The chamber was quiet when Elias was brought in again. His body still ached from the trials of the arena, his ribs sore and his arm wrapped with rough cloth where the spear had cut him. Yet his spirit remained unbroken. He had endured, and though he bore wounds, he carried them with pride. The queen sat on her throne, her golden eyes watching him with a steady fire. Around her, nobles whispered among themselves. Some called for his execution, saying the human was a danger, a disruption to their order. Others, though few, spoke with curiosity, wondering if the strange resilience of this fragile creature could teach them something. Soraka silenced them all with a lift of her hand. Her gaze locked on Elias. "You lived through the trials, human, yet you claim there is more to strength than what my people know. Today you will speak. Convince me with your words." Elias blinked. He had expected another test of flesh, another trial to break his body. But this was different. This was a test of the mind, perhaps even of the soul. He stood as straight as his tired body would allow and drew in a breath. The entire court stared at him, waiting for him to falter. "You want to know why we keep fighting?" Elias began, his voice rough but steady. "Even when we're weaker, even when we're outnumbered, even when every chance says we'll lose. It's because strength is not only about how hard you can hit or how long you can stand. Strength is about why you stand at all." A murmur passed through the nobles. Soraka's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in interest. Elias continued. "I'll tell you a story," he said. "On a world far from here during one of your invasions, I fought alongside men and women who knew they would not survive. We had no reinforcements, no ships to escape on, yet they stood. They held their ground not because they thought they would win, but because they wanted to give the families behind them a few more hours to escape. They fought until the last breath, and when the end came, they faced it together." His voice grew softer, but the words carried clearly. They weren't the strongest, but their sacrifice saved hundreds of children. Those children will grow, they will live, and their lives are the reason their parents died with honor. That is strength. To give of yourself even when you have nothing left. The hall was still. The nobles, so quick to laugh before, found themselves silent. Soraka leaned forward in her throne, her sharp eyes never leaving Elias. "You fight for others," she said slowly. "Not for conquest, not for power. You claim that is strength?" "Yes," Elias answered. "Because what is power if it leaves you empty? What is victory if it destroys what you claim to protect? Real strength is carrying the weight of others even when it breaks you." One noble hissed from the side. "Lies meant to weaken us. He tries to poison your mind, my queen." But Soraka raised her hand and silenced him without a word. Her gaze remained on Elias. Something inside her stirred, a question she had not asked herself in centuries. What did she fight for? She had ruled for so long through fear, through conquest, through the endless cycle of crushing and consuming. Yet listening to the human, she realized she could not answer his question. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice sharper now. "What drives you, human? You were captured. You have nothing. Why do you still defy me? Why do you not surrender?" Elias lifted his chin, meeting her eyes without fear. "Because surrender would make me less than what I am. You can take my body, you can chain me, but you can't change who I am unless I let you, and I won't." His words struck the chamber like a blade. Some nobles scoffed, but others remained uneasy, shifting in their places. They had seen his endurance in the arena. Now they heard the fire in his words. This was not weakness, it was something else, something they did not understand. Soraka sat back slowly, her golden eyes reflecting a thought she did not speak aloud. For so long she had seen other species as prey or tools, but this human, he was neither. His words carried a weight that clawed at her mind. He was fragile, yet he stood against her without trembling. He was powerless, yet he spoke as if he held the truth of the universe in his chest. Elias's voice softened again. "You wanted me to prove my claim. I can't make you believe. But I can tell you this. Strength is not just about surviving. It's about giving meaning to survival. It's about protecting something greater than yourself. That is what makes us human." The queen did not answer. Her eyes lingered on him long after the guards pulled him back. For the first time in memory, her court was left in silence, uncertain. No laughter, no jeers, only thought. That night, when Soraka returned to her private chambers, she found herself restless. She dreamed not of victory or conquest, but of the human's words, his stories of sacrifice, of families, of love. She had never spoken such words herself. They felt weak, fragile, foolish, and yet they felt powerful too. In a way her armies and her throne could not explain. She sat in the darkness of her chamber, her clawed hand resting against the cold crystal of her throne. The image of the human's defiant eyes burned in her mind. She had expected to crush him with trials, to silence him with pain. Instead, he had left her unsettled, with questions she could not ignore. And for the first time in many years, Queen Soraka felt something unfamiliar stirring within her. Doubt. The days that followed were heavy with whispers. The human soldier had not only survived the arena, he had spoken words that refused to leave the minds of those who had heard them. Some nobles called him dangerous, demanding his death. Others stayed silent, but their silence carried unease. In the heart of the Dominion, a single prisoner had unsettled the order built through centuries of fear. Elias remained in his small chamber. His wounds healed slowly, but his mind stayed sharp. Each day he wondered if this would be his last. Perhaps the queen would tire of him, or her council would demand his head. Yet when the guards came again, they did not bring chains for execution. They brought him once more to the great hall. The queen sat in her throne, tall and unyielding. But there was something different in her eyes now, a flicker of thought behind the golden fire. Around her the court bristled, tense and restless. She raised her hand and silence fell. "You will speak again, human," Soraka said. "Your words have stirred my court. Some call them weakness, some call them madness, but I wish to hear more. Tell me, what gives your kind the will to rise when beaten down again and again?" Elias studied her face. She was not mocking him. She wanted an answer, though she would not admit it to her people. He drew in a breath. "We rise," he said slowly, "because if we don't, the people who depend on us will fall. Every soldier I've known carried more than his own life. He carried the weight of his family, his friends, his people. Even in defeat we rise because hope rises with us." The words spread across the hall like ripples on water. Some nobles scoffed, but others shifted uneasily, as if they too felt the weight of the soldier's voice. Soraka's claws tapped against the arm of her throne. "Hope," she repeated. The word seemed foreign in her mouth. "A fragile thing. My people do not need hope. We need strength. We rule through fear because it cannot be broken." Elias shook his head. His voice was quiet but steady. "Fear can break. Hope can't. Fear makes others obey because they're afraid of pain, but when pain comes, fear crumbles. Hope is different. Hope carries people forward even when everything else is lost. That's why we're still here, even after all you've done to us." The nobles hissed in anger. They called the human insolent, accused him of insulting the queen. A few demanded his execution. The hall threatened to erupt, but Soraka silenced them again with a single gesture. Her golden eyes locked on Elias, and for a long moment she did not speak. Finally, she leaned forward. Her voice dropped lower, sharp but quieter, so that it seemed meant for him alone. "And what of me, human? You speak of hope and meaning. Tell me, what do you see in me?" The question caught Elias off guard. His first instinct was to answer carefully, but then he remembered what had kept him alive so far. Honesty. He raised his head and met her gaze. "I see someone who has all the power in the world," he said, "but doesn't know why she holds it. You conquer, but for what? You rule, but for what? You've built a throne on fear. But even fear has cracks. Maybe you're asking yourself the same question, even if you don't want to admit it." The hall fell silent again. The nobles stared in shock. No one had ever spoken to their queen in such a way. Guards tensed, their hands gripping their weapons. One more word and they might cut him down. But Soraka did not strike him. Instead, her eyes narrowed, her chest rising with a D. Body breath. For a long moment she seemed as if she might lash out, but then she sat back slowly. Her gaze burned with a strange fire. Anger, yes, but also curiosity. That night, when the hall was empty, Soraka walked alone in her private chambers. The words of the human echoed in her mind. "What do you fight for?" She had dismissed the thought before, but now it returned, sharp and insistent. She looked at her reflection in the polished black crystal, at the tall, imposing figure she had become, the figure all her people feared. And yet, In the silence, she found no answer to his question. Her council confronted her the next day. They spoke with urgency, warning her that the human was corrupting her mind. "He is dangerous," they said. His words spread like disease. "If you do not kill him, others will question your strength. Doubt is poison, my queen. End it before it spreads." Soraka listened, but she did not decide. Instead, she dismissed them and remained alone. She thought of Elias again, of his stories of sacrifice, of mothers who fought for their children, of soldiers who died for a cause greater than themselves. The words were fragile, but they had taken root inside her. That night she dreamed of voices she had never heard before. Laughter, music, the sound of children running in fields untouched by war. She woke unsettled, her claws digging into the stone of her throne. These dreams were not hers. They were planted by the human's words. Yet she could not tear them out. And though she rose with the dawn, proud and tall as always, doubt lingered like a shadow in her heart. For the first time in centuries, Queen Soraka wondered if her empire was not as strong as she had always believed. The guards came at night, silent and grim. Elias thought they had come to end him at last. He rose from the stone bed, his body stiff and his wounds half-healed, ready to meet death with steady eyes. But instead of dragging him to an execution ground, they led him through narrow passages and hidden stairways. When the heavy door opened, he found himself not in the great hall but in a smaller chamber lit by soft blue fire. The air was warmer here, quieter, away from the noise of the court. And at the center, standing beside a long table of dark crystal, was Queen Soraka herself. She was not in full armor this time, only in robes of deep black lined with silver. Without her throne and without her guards at her side, she seemed less a figure of legend and more a living being. For a long moment, Elias simply stared at her, unsure why he had been brought here. Then Soraka's golden eyes fixed on him, sharp but curious. "You will speak to me alone tonight," she said. "No court, no counsel, only truth." The guards closed the doors behind them, leaving Elias and the queen in silence. He did not lower his gaze. "Truth is all I have," he said. Soraka studied him, her claws resting lightly on the crystal table. "You have disturbed my thoughts, human. Your words cling to me like shadows. My counsel demands your death, yet I bring you here. Do you understand the risk I take?" Elias gave a faint smile. "I think you're not afraid of risk. You're afraid of the questions my words leave behind." Her eyes narrowed, but she did not strike him down. Instead, she asked, "Tell me again, why does your kind fight so fiercely? Why do you sacrifice so easily for others? It is illogical. My people see such things as weakness." Elias stepped closer, though the guards behind the doors could have ended him in an instant if he dared too much. His voice was calm, steady. "Because when we fight only for ourselves, we're empty. But when we fight for each other, for family, for friends, for strangers who need us, our lives have meaning. That meaning gives us strength that doesn't break, even when our bodies do." Soraka's golden eyes flickered, reflecting the blue firelight. "Meaning," she repeated quietly, as if testing the word on her tongue. "I have conquered countless worlds. I rule millions. Yet when I stand alone in my chamber at night, I wonder what all of it is for." "Is that the emptiness you speak of?" Elias hesitated, sensing her honesty. This was no trap. She was asking not as a queen, but as someone burdened with her own questions. He nodded slowly. "Yes, power without purpose leaves only emptiness. You don't need me to tell you that, you already feel it." She did not respond at once. She turned her gaze toward the dark crystal walls, as though searching for an answer hidden in their reflections. At last she asked, "And what would you say if I told you I wished for something different? A way to rule not with fear, but with whatever it is your people carry?" Elias studied her carefully. He could see the conflict in her, the ruthless queen torn between habit and something new stirring inside. His words had planted doubt, and doubt was spreading. "I'd say it's not too late," Elias said. "You have the power to change more than any single human ever could. But change begins with choice. You have to want it." Her jaw tightened, her claws curling slightly against the table. "My council will not allow such weakness. Already they whisper that I am unsteady. They plot behind my back. If I show them softness, they will strike." Elias's gaze was firm. "Then prove them wrong. Show them strength they've never seen before, the strength to build instead of destroy. That will frighten them more than any weapon." The queen's eyes burned as she stared at him. For a long moment there was only silence, broken by the faint hum of the walls. Then slowly her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. It was not cruel nor mocking, but thoughtful. "You speak as if you are more than a soldier," she said. "I am a soldier," Elias replied. "But every soldier carries more than a weapon. We carry the hopes of those who can't fight. That is what gives us our voice." The queen turned away, pacing slowly, her robes trailing across the stone floor. She did not speak again for some time. When she finally did, her words were quiet but heavy. "If what you say is true, then my empire is weaker than I believed. And if it is weaker than I believed, then perhaps I am weaker than I believed." Elias took a step forward, his voice low. "Or maybe you're stronger than you think, because you're finally asking the right questions." Her eyes snapped back to him, sharp and searching. In that gaze, Elias saw a battle raging inside her. She was a ruler feared across the stars, but for the first time in her reign, she stood at the edge of something unknown. Choice. When the guards returned to escort him away, Soraka did not dismiss him with mockery or threats. She only watched him as he left, her expression unreadable, but her golden eyes lingered, as if holding onto the human's words even after he was gone. That night, the queen sat alone in her chamber. The stars stretched endless outside her window, cold and silent. Yet in her mind she heard the echo of Elias's voice. "Power without purpose leaves only emptiness." And for the first time, Queen Soraka longed for something she had never known before, a purpose beyond fear. The Dominion was restless. On the outer colonies, flames of rebellion began to rise. Whispers spread that the queen hesitated to crush the uprisings with her usual cruelty. Some said she was growing soft. Others said she had been poisoned by the words of the human prisoner. The Council of Warlords gathered more often now, their voices sharp with anger and fear. Elias did not know this at first. He only knew that the guards came less frequently, that his food was poorer, and that the air of the palace felt heavy with tension. But when he was summoned again to the great hall, he saw it in the faces of the nobles. Their eyes were sharp, their mouths curled in contempt. They wanted him gone. The queen sat tall upon her throne, but even Elias could sense the weight pressing on her. Her golden eyes still burned, but behind them was a shadow she could not hide. When she raised her hand, the hall grew silent. "A world under our rule has risen against us," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "My council demands I burn it to ash. But I wish to hear what the human says. What should I do?" The nobles gasped. For their queen to ask advice from a prisoner, a human no less, was unthinkable. Murmurs turned into open anger, but Soraka silenced them with a single glance. Her gaze returned to Elias, waiting. Elias felt the weight of the moment. His words could shape more than his own fate. He drew in a slow breath. "If you destroy that world, you may silence their voices for a time. But others will rise after them. You cannot rule forever with fire and chains. If you want peace, you must give them a reason to stand with you, not against you." A noble snarled from the side. "Lies, he seeks to weaken you, my queen, end him." But Soraka's eyes never left Elias. "And what reason would they accept?" she asked. Elias met her gaze. "Mercy, a chance to live with dignity. If you offer them respect, if you show them that your rule can protect as well as conquer, they will not need to fight you." The chamber erupted in outrage. Nobles shouted over one another, their voices sharp with fury. "Weakness," one cried. "Treachery," another howled.
"He poisons her mind."
But Soraka raised her hand again, and the hall fell into silence. She rose from her throne, her tall figure casting a long shadow across the chamber. Her golden eyes swept over the nobles, unflinching. "Enough," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of thunder. "I have ruled through fear for centuries, and yet fear does not last. This human speaks truth. Perhaps it is time we learn another way." The words sent shockwaves through the hall. The Council of Warlords stiffened, their claws tightening on the hilts of their weapons. The queen had never spoken like this before. Doubt filled their faces, but also anger. They bowed their heads, but their eyes burned with silent rebellion. Later, in her private chamber, Soraka stood alone. The rebellion was not just on the outer worlds, it was here, in her own palace, in the hearts of those who had once obeyed without question. Her advisors pressed her to kill the human and prove her strength, but each time she thought of it, she felt only emptiness. His words had taken root too deeply. Elias was brought to her again, but this time not in chains. He was led into her chamber quietly while the palace slept. The queen stood near the great window, the stars stretching endless behind her. "They hate you," she said without turning. Her voice was quieter than he had ever heard it. "They say you poison me. Perhaps they are right." Elias stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I haven't poisoned you. I've only reminded you of something you already knew. That fear cannot last forever. You've built an empire of iron, but even iron rusts." She turned to face him, her golden eyes burning with conflict. "If I follow your words, I may lose everything. My throne, my power, my life. My people will not forgive mercy." Elias met her gaze, unflinching. "Or you may gain something greater than fear. You may build something that lasts longer than your armies. But you have to choose. No one else can." Her claws tightened at her sides, her breath heavy. For a long time she said nothing. Then, with a voice like stone cracking under pressure, she whispered, "I do not know if I have that kind of strength." Elias took another step closer. His body was weak, his clothes torn, but his voice carried with a fire that could not be ignored. "Strength isn't never being afraid. Strength is doing the right thing even when you are afraid. That's what your people have never seen. That's what will make them follow you, even if they don't understand it at first." Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for weakness, but all she saw was truth. Fragile flesh, broken body, yet a spirit unyielding. When the guards came to take him away, the queen did not stop them. But as the doors closed, she whispered words no one else heard. "Perhaps you are right, human. Perhaps mercy is the greater strength." The next day, when the council demanded she burn the rebellious world, she refused. Her voice rang through the palace, firm and cold. "We will not destroy them. We will give them choice." The council stiffened, their faces pale with fury. In their silence, Soraka knew the truth. By sparing the world, she had drawn the line. Her enemies were no longer just on distant planets. They were now in her own court. And for the first time in her reign, Queen Soraka felt fear not of her enemies, but of the storm her own choice had unleashed. The palace was no longer safe. Rumors spread through its corridors like fire in dry grass. The council whispered in secret rooms, plotting against their queen. Guards who once bowed with pride now looked away, unsure where their loyalties lay. And through it all, Queen Soraka carried herself tall, though she knew the storm was closing around her. Elias remained in his chamber, but his heart was heavy. He had seen the way the nobles stared at him, as though he were a curse upon the throne. He knew they would not rest until he was gone. Yet he also knew that Soraka had already crossed a line she could never step back from. By choosing mercy, she had chosen a path that frightened her own kind more than any battle ever had. The breaking point came during the Great Council. The warlords gathered, their robes glittering with pride and their claws sharp with intent. They bowed, but not with respect. Their voices rose in challenge. "You endanger the empire," one growled. "The outer worlds grow bold because you show weakness." Another slammed his fist against the table. "We must strike now before rebellion spreads like disease. Burn them all as we have always done." But Soraka's golden eyes burned with calm fire. "No," she said. "We will not burn. We will not destroy. We will build. Those who rise against us will be offered peace, and those who accept will stand with us, not beneath us." The chamber shook with outrage. One warlord spat on the floor. "This is not our way. You are no queen, you are a traitor to your own blood." The council erupted, claws drawn, voices rising like a storm. In the midst of chaos, Soraka stood tall and silent, and then, in a voice that cut through the noise like a blade, she said, "If you believe I am unworthy to rule, then take the throne from me with your own hands." Silence fell. The challenge hung heavy in the air. To move against the queen openly meant civil war. But her words left them no other path. That night Elias was brought before her again, though this time there was no fire in her eyes. She stood by the great window. The stars stretched endless, her robes trailing like shadows behind her. "They will come for me," she said softly. "Perhaps tonight, perhaps tomorrow. They will not allow this path." "Not while I sit on the throne." Elias stepped closer. "Then you must be ready. If you fall now, your dream dies with you. But if you stand, even for a little longer, the seed you've planted may grow beyond you." Her golden eyes turned toward him, filled with something he had never seen before. Not anger, not cruelty, but fear and hope. "And if I do not survive?" Elias gave a faint smile, weary but steady. "Then someone else will carry your choice forward. Once an idea is spoken, it cannot be killed." Before she could answer, the doors burst open. Armed guards stormed the chamber, led by 3 warlords with blades drawn. Their eyes burned with hatred. "It ends tonight," one hissed. "The throne belongs to strength, not weakness." Soraka's claws glinted as she raised her hand. "Then come and see if your strength can match mine." The chamber erupted in violence. Blades clashed, guards shouted, and the sound of steel against claw filled the air. Elias ducked behind the table, his body weak but his mind racing. He watched Soraka fight with a fury that shook the room. Each strike swift and merciless, each movement like lightning. She was not the Queen of Mercy now. She was the warrior her enemies feared. Yet for every enemy she struck down, another pressed forward. The warlords were strong, and their hatred gave them courage. Elias knew she could not hold them forever. Desperation filled him. He grabbed a fallen weapon from the floor, though his arms trembled with the effort. He stumbled into the fight, placing himself between the queen and a warlord ready to strike her down. The blade came toward him, and for a moment, he thought it would end there. But Soraka's roar shook the chamber. She struck the warlord aside, saving Elias, though her own arm was cut in the process. Blood darkened her robes, but she did not falter. At last, with one final blow, she drove the last traitor to the ground. Silence filled the chamber, broken only by her ragged breathing. The floor was stained with blood, the air heavy with smoke. Soraka stood over the fallen warlords, her body trembling but unbroken. Her golden eyes turned to Elias, who leaned on the shattered table for support. "You saved me," she said, her voice rough. He shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I only reminded you why." For a long moment there was silence between them. Then Soraka looked out the window, at the endless stars beyond. "Perhaps there is hope," she whispered. The days that followed were tense. The rebellion in the palace had been crushed, but whispers still remained. Yet word of the queen's choice spread across the stars. On the outer worlds, those who had risen against her hesitated. They expected fire and death, but instead they were offered peace. Some refused, but many accepted, uncertain yet curious. For the first time in memory, the Dominion was not ruled only by fear. Elias remained at her side, not as a prisoner, but as an advisor. His body was weak, but his spirit was strong, and his words had carried farther than he ever imagined. The soldier who had once been captured in chains now stood as the voice that changed an empire. Queen Soraka knew the road ahead would not be easy. Her council would never fully trust mercy, and her enemies would wait for her to falter. But each night, when she stood at the great window and looked out at the stars, she no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted her, for she carried something new within her, a purpose. And beside her stood the human who had given her that gift, not with strength, not with weapons, but with words alone.